Hey everyone, we're back with another fun TLN webinar, and today we're talking about suicide awareness with therapist Gary Atkins. And Gary is with our AllOne Health, our EAP here at TLN. So I will let Gary take it away.
Thank you so much, DJ. I am excited to be able to talk about this topic, although it can be heavy. I think it's a great one to be able to kind of have some awareness of, as well as provide additional support. So we're going to hop right into it. And if there's any questions, do not hesitate to pop them into the chart at any point during the presentation. Okay. So as we noted earlier, our presentation today is going to be on suicide awareness. So, for everyone, again, I'm Gary Atkins. I'm a mental health counselor by trade. I've been a counselor for many, many years now, probably 8 or 9 years. So a lot of different levels of experience with suicide as well as suicide awareness. So we're just going to take the time to identify with what our goal is going to be. So our goal for today is going to be to make sure everybody leaves with helpful, practical information. This is going to be a relaxed, supportive space. We hope to not make this too stressful as we know that the topic is very difficult. Feel free to again jot down any questions you may have, and then we will have time for Q&A if you need to have a Q&A or if your question is more personal, I'll leave an email address that you guys can send them over to. You can send them to me and or I will have a contact number for AllOne Health to be able to provide you with that. There will be a QR code at the end that we'll be able to scan for feedback. If you can take that survey, that'd be awesome. If not, I totally understand. We get pretty busy throughout the day. Again, my goal here is to not add stress for you guys. So as we get started, there is a disclaimer. This presentation is not intended to provide medical and or mental health diagnoses, advice, or treatment. The content of this presentation is provided for reference and educational purposes only. So, if an individual is at imminent risk to harm of self and or others, we really advise you just to call 911 immediately and not utilize what you learn in this training to begin to assess, diagnose, and identify if they're going to hurt themselves. I would say is if we see something, we should say something. So therefore, if we are in a position to where we identify someone could be potentially suicidal, it's better to make the call and have a trained professional identify if they need additional support than it would be for us to do it just from this training. So our objectives are going to be to review important terms. We're going to spend a little bit of time discussing some of the myths about suicide that are out there. We're also going to begin to look at some of the signs and or symptoms that we may have from someone who's looking for potential help, right? Maybe they're not going to be in a position where they want to complete suicide, but looking just for help in general. We're going to identify what are some of the best practices for responding to someone who may be at risk, as well as discuss how the EAP is available to help with additional support if needed. So, for a lot of us, we have to identify that suicide does bring about a lot of different feelings. These feelings can be shame, fear, intense pain, trauma, discomfort, and many people want to try to avoid it and hide it. And not telling anyone what you're going through, a lot of people aren't even going to be able to help, right? So that's like the difficult aspect of it. It's like it's a difficult topic. I know that even not only just in the US, but other countries as well, suicide and mental health, it's hard because for a lot of us, it's something that we don't necessarily know too much about without the other person being an active participant. It is noted that suicide does bring a lot of pain, not only for the person who is experiencing thoughts of suicide, but then again, the individuals who survive, the individual who potentially does complete. So we know that mental health is very common and treatable. Help is available. And for a lot of the people who identify often that, I think my grandmother says it best, I don't need no help, Gary. I can do all these things. She says, I'm from the, what was it, 40s. I know how to work through these things. It's like, okay, grandma, I feel you. And I always have to remind her that oftentimes asking for help is a sign of bravery, not a sign of weakness. So to reach out for help, allows you to not only hit that point of being vulnerable, but also to ensure that you have what you need. And then she says, "You know what, grandbaby, you right. I raised you, but I'm still from the South." And I always laugh with her and say, "I know, Grandma, but even in the South, we have struggles too." And she's able to acknowledge that. So, since we are going to be working to build suicide awareness, we're also going to break down some of these misconceptions and explain some of the different risk factors and warning signs that and walk through a couple of the services that are available. So some of the important terms that we're going to talk about. These important terms are going to include risk factors. So these can be static conditions, right? So they do not predict suicidal behavior and may not signify anything by themselves, but indicate that someone is at a higher risk or vulnerable to suicide when these stressors are in picture, right? So some of these stressors that could be at play that are, someone may be at higher risk are going to be being single, maybe being older, especially if illness or a recent bereavement has occurred. Sometimes race, it's been noted in psychological studies that Caucasians and Native Americans are more likely to die by suicide than any other races. There also could be like prior attempts by family and or a history of suicide attempts. Mental illness or substance abuse problems such as depression, PTSD, and anxiety have also been linked to higher risk factors of suicide ideation, and as well as like any form of child abuse, neglect, bullying, or sexual assault. So when you think of risk factors, these are like those five or six things that we just noted there are conditions that typically have been closely linked to suicide ideation, but not necessarily the act of suicide. These are by themselves, right? You have to kind of and identify with a lot of different ways of those. So some of the warning signs are that may be more immediate or imminent in nature, tend to imply more of an imminent risk, such as maybe they've acted upon it before. They'll be able to take like that time to identify that the observations which you may have are going to be beneficial. So, as it even says there, like observe signs that imply imminent risk of suicide for someone in the near term. So, usually that's done like within hours or days. Usually, I mean, suicide ideation can preservate for more than that. When we're looking at imminent risk of harm in ourselves to others, that timeline is fairly important. Some of the psychosocial stressors. So when we think of psychosocial stressors, what we're trying to identify with is these are external pressures or changes in life circumstances that occur shortly before a suicide attempt. Often these stressors represent like the last straw for someone. You may hear someone identify with that old saying of the straw that broke the camel's back. With that, that's the same with some of the psychosocial stressors that we may see. So for the individual, they could already be struggling, like maybe with substance abuse, right? Job insecurity, especially during today's time. That's hard because, with different cuts and different things of that nature, and it can create more stress because then we have financial problems, legal problems, and our relationship conflict. So those are some of those psychosocial stressors that typically lead to higher rates of suicide. And then there are protective factors. So these are influences that buffer against the risk for suicide. They promote resiliency. They reduce not only the potential for suicide, but other high risk behaviors. Examples of protective factors include effective coping and problem solving skills. So if we have those, that's a good protective factor. I know for me, usually when I'm meeting with someone who may have suicide ideation and or passive thoughts, we identify, what are your coping skills? Who are your support system? Do you have any family or friends that you're close to? Like, where do you find community? Like, a lot of these different things. When we're able to have those things notated for an individual or client, or even like a family member, it helps them navigate through like stress immensely because usually we can kind of guide them towards one of those, again, coping skills, those community groups, and or like that environment that they feel most supported. So again, we're not going to have to do that as the individuals taking the training, but more so these are things that you'd kind of look out for if you were going to identify to get them potential help. So suicide in the United States, there are over 49,000 Americans who died by suicide in 2022. Suicide has been the 11th leading cause of death in the US. It is the second leading cause of death for individuals 10 to 14 and 25 to 34. And there are 1.7 million attempts a year. I don't know about you guys, but those are some pretty steep numbers, right? And one that always sticks out for me is like the age. the ages of cause of death, right? 10 to 14, I'm like, those are babies still, right? Still going through early phases of life, trying to figure out who they are, just kind of getting their sparkle, as I say. And then the 25 through 34, again, still in that same boat, getting their sparkle, figuring out who they are as an adult, figuring out what they want to do, career orientation, things like that. So like when I think of these statistics, I think like within taking context of those two groups, as well as like how many attempts there are made, that means that this is instrumental, right? In order to be able to get help, we have to be able to know how and what we can do. And this research was done by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Center for Disease Control and Prevention. So that's definitely like an article through the CDC. If you want to look at that research, I can also pop that over in the chat later to allow you to be able to read that article because it can be eye-opening to identify not only with those numbers, but also what they've kind of found as far as like those other risk factors. So there's so much talk about suicide and often a lot of shame, right? So usually someone who is suicidal often experiences a lot of shame due to the fact that they feel as though they should be able to manage life. I don't know how many people fall victim to the comparative analysis. I know like with technology and like social media, that can definitely prompt quite a bit to where usually if we find ourselves looking at a lot of these different avenues and we're not in the same position as these people, we sometimes feel hurt, right? Why don't I have a yacht? Why, if you like Jay-Z, why am I not on the boat with Jay-Z? I mean, why am I not out there hanging out with Beyonce? And it's like, well, that's not necessarily in the wheelhouse for everybody. So sometimes, like, it can bring about shame when we're utilizing comparative analysis. So all survivors of suicide as well are emotionally impacted, and those individuals often ask, how could this have happened? Right? There should have been warning signs. I should have saw things that were going on. How did I not see this? Is another question. What could I have done differently? How am I going to ask people about this? There are so many different layers of emotion that typically prompt when we are assisting and or an individual who's had someone complete suicide. And while connection is most helpful, it can be hard to feel comfortable reaching out, especially when there are so many judgments and stigmas about suicide. So for this reason, we're going to discuss what we can do and what we should do, as well as avoiding in situations where we believe someone may be considering suicide. And I think that if we do have those questions are not abnormal. And the hard part is, even as trained professionals, there's a lot of things that are beyond our control. So I know that for a lot of individuals, we often find ourselves, beating ourselves up, maybe get a little bit tougher on ourselves. But even as trained professionals, it can be difficult to not only assess for, but diagnose as well as get the treatment for suicide ideation without proper, again, hours and hours of research as well as treatment protocols and safety measures that we have in place here at our agency. So some of the myths that we may see is asking someone about suicide will only plant the seed in someone's mind. That's false, right? Suicide ideation is a topic that hopefully one day will become as comfortable as it is to identify with that old saying of how's the weather? Or hey, how you doing today? Midwest nice. We keep walking to where like hopefully like within the nature of continuation of growth, suicidation does become more of a topic because it is important. So asking someone if they are suicidal does not plant that thought in their mind because usually suicidation is something that is thought about well before that. So if you're asking, it's more so for that person you're asking out of concern, which then also allows them to kind of take a step back and think about what have I been presenting recently. Another myth is that only therapists can help someone who is struggling with thoughts of suicide. That's not most accurate, right? There are a lot of people who could help. The reality is that oftentimes people just need to feel connected with someone else, that someone has to be an individual that generally cares about you. So again, like when we're talking with these individuals who may, especially if they're family members and our close colleagues, be contemplating suicide, we could talk to them about it, right? We're not going to diagnose them, as someone who's suicidal ideation and or severely depressed. More so, we're just going to be empathetic and a human that can connect with them by saying, hey, I hear you, I understand, right? Through like what you're saying, that we're to a place in which maybe we feel like we can't claw back. Let's reach out together and get some help. And that's kind of when like you kind of walk them essentially to the bridge, but not across with them. The clinician in which you guys get the help from, as well as like maybe 911 or their emergency line, they're going to be the ones that kind of help them cross the bridge to sort through, as well as figure out what changes, as well as like what level of support they need. So you can still be a human and be empathetic and connect with them, because usually when someone's suicidal, it oftentimes is because they feel alone. Another myth is that if someone decides they want to take their own life, there's nothing that we can do to stop them. I feel like this one's always a hard one because I know that there are often times in which we've been taught that in some way, shape, or form, but that's maybe not the most accurate reflection of how it truly is. Like when people are suicidal, many times they're highly ambivalent and are torn between a desire to live and a desire to take their lives. So by taking action, getting that person linked to treatment, you can actually help strengthen that person's desire to live. And I'll give you a story. There was the Golden Gate Bridge. Are we familiar with that? That's out in California, right? That has been one of the hot spots for attempts at suicide and completions due to the fact of, I don't know if you've been up there, I've been up there after I learned all these things, like, oh, let me look down. Like, oh, that's very high. In a sense that that's why it's one of those bridges that individuals typically tend to gravitate towards because it's very high, the speed of impact would be very quickly, and it's almost guaranteed that if you were to go from there, you would complete. But there's an individual who's done a lot of different TED Talks and things like that, who talks about it, his experience and how he was on his last straw, right? The straw that broke the camel's back. Went to the bridge, decided today was the day, looked around for anybody and everybody who could potentially make a connection to stop him. Didn't get that. Jumped off the bridge. Halfway down through the jump, he identified, I don't want to die. I want to actually live, but I've jumped. Goes in, sorry, we're on its train about suicide, hits the water, actually ends up surviving. Then took his story to identify with, oftentimes they've identified there's nothing that you can do, but then again, being a compassionate, empathetic human in that moment likely would have stopped me from jumping. Now that I did not die because I did not want to die, as I jumped, right, I'm able to now utilize my story to help support other people. So again, like when we think of that statement of like if someone decides they want to take their own life, there's nothing we can do to stop them. That's why I say that can be inaccurate because there are anomalies that truly do want support. They just struggle with asking for it. I know I do sometimes when I'm at the hardware store trying to find items and or like trying to find wood for projects, things like that. I never ask. I'll look around for hours. I'm like, Gary, we just wasted an hour of our time. We could have asked for some help and they would have helped us and got us straight. We could have started this project, but now we gotta go bed in a sense that it can be hard. And like, I know we laugh, but it's like one of those things where it can be hard to ask for help. But the more comfortable we allow ourselves to get, the better it's going to be for not only us, but other people around us. And I see we have a question. Do you have any suggestion for conversation starters, connect with employee we may not be close to? Yes. So I always say like usually for me, I know that we have a terminology called Midwest Nice. Where like we'll ask how someone's doing but keep walking. But I think that if we set a time and a space to have these conversations, that can be beneficial. Good conversation starter could be like, hey, how are you doing? I know we're not necessarily the most closest, but I just want to check in to see like how have things been for you? And then, prompt from there. Because what you're doing then is you're opening the door for them to kind of step in by not being super intrusive. But if you feel as though that employee is suicidal, I always say sometimes it's best to not skate around it and just ask the question because you'll either get I'm appalled, why would you ask that? And or like, what do you mean? Which also then opens the door for further conversation because then you can express your, what do you call it, your observations, as well as like some things that may have led to you asking that kind of question. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. Just as me as a clinician by nature, I won't say I'm nosy, but I always ask questions. Even at the store, my toddler now, he's 4. He says, Dad, I'm be like, yo, I'm gonna ask everybody questions, see how they do. I'm like, don't do that, baby. Because sometimes they might answer and you might not know how to respond. But it's okay because your dad be right there and I can help you. But it's like one of those things where the more comfortable you get, you'll be able to kind of figure out as well as notate who likes what and when. And I think that often for us, like when we're doing a lot of different coworker connections, that's another time where we're kind of continuing to learn about people as well as like where there's warning signs or indicators that they're not okay. So I always say like for a lot of people, if they dress pretty fairly nicely and then change the way they dress. If they are, I'm very outgoing. So if I'm not outgoing, my boss is like, "What is wrong, Gary? You sick? What's going on?" I'm like, "No, I'm just tired today." So like kind of like knowing their baseline is instrumental. So once, even if you don't know them too well, once we get to know their baseline, there'll also be cause for us to be able to bring up some of these conversations. Another myth is that you never know when someone is considering suicide. They're typically it's hard to tell, but like signs or symptoms, like someone who gives away their things, right? Maybe in the office identify, I don't need all these things. I don't really care. Maybe they were outgoing, again, energetic, have drawn back. Maybe they were head of a lot of different committees, very engaged, become more withdrawn. Maybe they just notate, make blatant statements, say, what, life would be better off without me, or maybe I'd be better off dead. Although we sometimes people use those things in passing, those can also be great signs to look for of someone who could be suicidal. So some of the possible warning signs that we want to look out for, again, these are changes in behavior or appearances that indicate someone is in crisis. So again, the most important aspect is baseline, because if you know me at baseline, again, if I'm energetic, then you know that if I'm not energetic, I'm either tired, which is usually the case. My toddler does not like to sleep, and or I'm not feeling great. So my boss always asks, "How you doing?" If I, for myself personally, again, I am somebody who participates quite a bit in meetings. If I'm not participating, that's also a sign. My boss will send me a Teams message, "Hey, you good today? You normally have great feedback and great levels of support. You're not talking today. You just kind of look out of it." That's another aspect to kind of look out for. So other big thing indicators for crises could be someone threatening to hurt or kill themselves, right? They may just blanket say it as we did it just prior to this PowerPoint slide. Someone looking for means like guns, pills, ropes, etc. to kill themselves. They have a clear plan. That's automatic. Call 911 because that is someone who is very much at imminent risk of harm to self and or others, to the fact that they're looking for these things, as well as that means that they likely have a plan. So we call 911. We don't necessarily have to dial too much into it. Someone showing signs of distress, agitation, and or anxiety, reckless, impulsive behavior, and isolation. Again, I'm a social butterfly, so usually I don't isolate too much. But again, if I was isolating more, my supervisor would reach out and say, "Gary, what's going on?" Because this isn't like you. She likes to utilize the terminology "hey yo," like "hey, are you okay?" to identify with "hey, are you okay?" And if you're not okay, do you want to talk about it? And if you don't want to talk about it, are you getting support? And if you're not getting support, we got to talk about it because I want to make sure that you do, right? So it's kind of prompted in those ways. So even if, back to that question too, if we don't know our coworker as much, if we do adapt to the "hey yo" mentality, like "hey, are you okay?" at least gives them the option to say yes or no, and then we can decide what our follow-up question may be. So if you notice any changes in behavior or think to yourself, "I'm worried about so and so," then you're likely noticing some of these indicators that something's going wrong. So these are up here, right? We have common feelings, actions, physical changes, and our thoughts that many suicidal people have experienced. So these can be cues for anyone to reach out and make a connection with someone who is struggling. So when you consider that ours in society that doesn't necessarily encourage admitting weakness or vulnerability, it may be necessary to point out these signs that you are seeing to the individual and ask them if they're having suicidal ideation, right? Some of the feelings we may identify with the person, like maybe they feel more desperate, worthless, guilty, lonely, or sad. If they are, right, some of these actions could be giving away possessions, withdrawn, abuse and use of substances. A lot of it could be extreme mood swings, increased impulsivity. So when we look at some of the physical, it would be lack of interest and appearance. So kind of looking more disheveled. I know my hair always look a little wild, but it's how it is. But with that, but if you always had your hair done and things like that, not having your hair done, maybe changes in appetite. You notice that Gary may eat every day at lunch. He ain't eat no more. He just kind of skipping through it. Changes in hygiene, sleep patterns, and fluctuations in weight quite a bit. Some of the thoughts that this individual will likely express is, "I just can't take it." That's a strong one, right? These are strong thoughts. "I wish I were dead. I can't do anything right. You'd be better off essentially without me, right? My family be better off without me. This employer be better off without me because all I do is mess up." all of my problems will be over soon. Like if we hear that one again, like those bottom two, for sure, I'm like, I want to get you the support that we can get you. So how about we come in, let's chat in this room over here, let's call together like 911 or even Encompass if you want to just kind of have them talk to someone right then to help make that call. We can, right, to help support them. So those are big ones that if we're having someone express these, we want to automatically kind of get them that heightened level of support and increase our level of success by calling with them. So when we're responding, these are certain things that we want to do. We do want to show that you care by listening and being genuine. Some statements that you can make is, I'm concerned about you and about how you feel. I am worried about you. Because when you're expressing things like that, it kind of shows them that not only does someone see me, they hear me and they care about me. And that can be awesome, especially when we're in that space where we don't feel like ourselves. So again, if we're doing that and we're showing that we are going to be able to listen as well as be genuine, we allow them to hopefully get the support they need. We want to be able to be sympathetic, patient, and accepting, right? A statement that we can make, again, you can modify these as however you want, is I'm glad that you came to me. Because then it kind of shows that, hey, I'm accepting of the information that you're sharing with me. And of course, like if it's beyond what I have the means to be able to support, I'm gonna get help you find the resources that you need, such as 911, 988, the mental health hotline, and things of that nature. Another thing that we should do is ask the question while being direct, caring, and non-confrontational. As we said before, are you thinking about suicide? A lot of people have held a taboo that you can't ask that question. I'm here to tell you that you can ask that question because what it does is it gives you the opportunity to say yes or no, right? It doesn't leave much to the imagination, and typically people don't skate around it because either A, they're offended in a good and or a bad way that we ask that question. But also, if they are, a lot of time what you see is that opens up the floodgates of emotions to where they feel seen and heard. And honestly, a lot of time we want that. And another thing that you want to do is you want to get help and do not leave the individual alone. A statement is, you're not alone. Let me help you. So I would identify we don't want to bring up these things and then say, okay, I hope you get the help you need and just walk away. That's not even midway nice. That's just mean. But then again, if we're gonna ask and prompt these things, that we allow ourselves the time, energy, and effort to kind of help follow through. And a lot of time for people, unless we're like a manager and our supervisor, we then could escalate it and say, hey, you know what? Like I know that we've shared a lot here today. We're gonna look for resources to get you the support that you may need. Kind of let the supervisor know, and that way again they're able to provide more reassurance as well as support that could be beneficial because then it gives time to call. And or if not, you can say, hey, there's been a lot, you shared a lot with me, you're not alone, let me help you, let's call together. Then you guys kind of call and they can walk you through the steps that may need to be able to take him. So if we do that, what we do is we open that door for them to feel heard, validated, and supported. So again, we want to identify any individual who gives any indication they're considering suicide should be referred to a local healthcare facility. And that's why we always say call 911. They're going to have what they need, as well as collect any information that they may need to be able to identify what is the highest or most appropriate level of care for that person. And in a case of immediate crisis, let the individual know, right? We're going to call 911. We don't have to skate around it and say, oh, I'm going to call someone. That then creates like a lack there of trust, and we don't want that. We can let them know, I'm going to call 911. When an individual's safety is at risk, the authorities must be involved to protect the individual and those close to the individual, right? As well as you, because you never know. Like sometimes things flip or switch. So I want to make sure that we all have what we need. So let them know we're going to call 911 and then making that phone call. And for additional support, especially for those who kind of build these scenarios and our situations, we always say contact the employee assistance program for yourself. Because what we do then is we create like a debrief for you to allow you to get the support that you may need and also have like the mental health, again, coping skills to allow yourself to move along too. Because it can be hard to not only take in that information, but also then know that you have a colleague that hasn't been feeling the best. It can also begin to have us question things too. So when we're responding, certain things that we want to avoid. Oh wait, sorry, I have a question on inside real quick. Can you call the EAP if your library does not participate? DJ.
I think the best thing you can do is probably if you were to reach out to the EAP and your library doesn't participate, just let us know, and we would probably just have you file under TLN.
Thank you so much. I'm like, DJ's gonna know, and he's gonna help me out because he always helps me out. With that, that is valid, and that's a great question. So, like you said, just give us a call, and then they'll work it from there. So, things that we want to avoid is leave an individual alone. We don't want to leave them by themselves. We want to remain with them. We want to, I mean, transport an individual or yourself or visit an individual at home, we definitely want to avoid that because if someone's suicidal, we are definitely not going to take them in our car and or go to the house to pick them up because that creates an unsafe environment for you as well as them. So again, we do not want to do that. We call 911. They're going to be the trained professionals in that capacity to go out there and support them. We don't want to argue with the individual and identify like some examples would be you have so much to live for. Look at the bright side. Why is your life so bad? You don't want to, that's not appropriate. And what that does, it creates a higher level of stress for them, as well as a higher probability that if they did complete, we would hold ourselves to some emotional attachment due to what we expressed. So we don't want to argue if we're in that position where we feel that attached. We have to just get them level of support and kind of remove ourselves. We don't want to lecture on the values of life, offer ways to fix the individual's problems. Like that can also not be beneficial because for them, I'm sure they've thought of ways to fix it, but in that moment, they don't necessarily see a way out. Even if you list 50 things they can do, they've thought of those 50 things, but they don't feel as though it's within their wheelhouse to do it at that point in time. We do not want to identify with the individual. I have depression too. Let's trauma bond over it. That's not the most helpful because unless you guys have a clinicians that are there that are trained as well as able to provide that support. What you do then is you trauma bond individuals, which doesn't mean that they're going to get the desired outcome that they want. It just means that you've added two people who are already overwhelmed and stressed and now both know it, and then that increases likelihood that both individuals could potentially complete suicide. And other things you want to avoid is blaming yourself. A lot of times, like individuals who become suicidal, it's not necessarily due to one circumstance and or situation. It's a culmination of precipitating events. So when we think of it, it's not necessarily that person's fault, as in yourself. You more so, there's just a lot of things that likely happen that, again, bridged upon the amount of resources and abilities that they had in that moment. So as we talked about before, there are certain risk factors that we should be aware of or things that kind of help. These are the protective factors, sorry, not risk factors, protective factors. So those things are skills, right? The ability to think, communicate, solve problems, manage anger and other negative emotions and coping skills. So if we have like a good wherewithal within that box of like skills, we're less likely to attempt and or complete suicide because we can then fall back on things that helped us in the past. When we have purpose and value, we can also identify that we're in a safer space because we have hope for the future. You're right. We have maybe pets, work and life focus, maybe family connections and support, as well as feelings of use in your world. When we have that, oftentimes suicidation is not even necessarily in our mind, but it is on the back burner because we know that there are different scenarios and or connection points that typically need our level of support and expertise. So we feel as though we're there to help continue to guide, as well as that we're fulfilling our mission statement, as most people identify that they have. Individuals with personal characteristics such as like maybe health, positive outlook on life, healthy lifestyle choices, as well as spirituality or religious beliefs. Those are also indicators in relation to protective factors across lifespan for individuals. Again, my biggest thing is always support. Individuals who have support are oftentimes, again, less likely to complete and or contemplate suicide because they know they have someone that they can talk to. So when we're thinking of individuals who may be more so in that boat, we're lacking people to talk to, as well as that additional support that we may need to navigate through complex avenues in life. So if we can build that support system, I always say it's good to know who your community is. Someone said, "No, Gary, it's my tribe." I'm like, "Hey, if you know who your tribe is, that's awesome." Our Beyonce is this, our beehive. Oh, I think. Sorry, we listened to a lot of Beyonce the other day for work. With that, being able to know who or where that can kind of take place is beneficial because you also want a safe environment. So you want restricted access to lethal means and personal safety. So I say individuals who are like at a lower risk of suicide with these protective factors, especially with safe environments, have their guns and weapons locked up, right? Have someone else who knows the code for these things, as well as able to change the code, right? Someone who identifies, I'm not going to the woods by myself because I'm not feeling the best. I want someone want to come on a walk with me, right? Or maybe I shouldn't go to the woods at all. I should be in a public space to be able to have support or maybe talk to my doctor. Those are, again, some of those safety factors that we look out for as far as across lifespan and less likelihood to contemplate and or complete suicide. There we go. So some of the resources for help, if your EAP is AllOne Health, that we're available 24/7 for in the moment support. In the moment support means I'm gonna take that phone, dial the number, call, and say, "Hey, my name's Gary Atkins. I am not feeling the best. I need to talk to somebody right now." They will usually bypass intake at that point, get you to a trained clinician. They will talk with you, be able to get you closer to what they would believe your baseline is. And then from there, what they do is they would complete the intake and get you additional support. As DJ said, if your EAP is not all in health, we're gonna have an EAP, you let him know and then they will get you set up through us to be able to provide you with that support. Another one is going to be the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 988. And with that, there's a web chat for that too. It's like suicidepreventionlifeline.org/chat, where you're able to kind of completely start the chat process to be able to identify a process, as well as notate some of the things that not only you maybe have seen, but if you are the person experiencing these thoughts, you can do that as well. But as we said before, if the individual is in imminent risk of harm to self and or others, you call 911 immediately. We don't call AllOne Health. We don't hit up maybe the 988 number for suicide prevention hotline. Let's call 911 because then they're going to get meet that person where they are and then walk them through the other steps they have to be successful. So again, like when we think of imminent risk of harm to yourself and or others, like you have a plan, intent, and action, right? So if you have a plan, let's say the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm going to go to the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm going to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge and I'm going to do it on Friday. That is imminent risk. Like those all red signs, red flags to say, no, this is a person that needs help right now. Call 911. But even if we are confused and maybe not so sure if we need to or not, I say just call anyway. And then if not, they will direct you to the place that you should go to. If it's over in East Side State, Pine Rest or Forest View, or I know there's a couple big hospitals on the east side of the state and north and south, actually in Michigan, that are able to be utilized. Like we call one of those local hospitals for that support. They'll get us there if we need to. So we have to remember this presentation is not intended to provide medical and or mental health diagnoses, advice, or treatment. This is just provide us context for educational purposes only. So if we take anything from today, if we're at imminent risk of harm to self and or others, call 911. Because I know I'm not like a doctor where I'm going to do a surgery. So I wouldn't expect you to do that either in the mental health world. So I want to make sure that if we are questioning it, let's just call 911. So how the EAP helps, because we all have access to it, is AllOne Health treats the whole individual with integrated support for all areas of emotional wellness. We can help with issues such as emotional wellness, stress management, family relationships and issues, anxiety and depression, coping and grieving, anger management, and substance abuse. So the EAP is like I always say, I describe it as like short-term solution focus, where we help you identify with potential concern and then maybe work through like what's led up to us being disconnected in relation to being able to solve for, as well as what is kind of keeping us maybe in the realm that we've been in before. Such as if we find ourselves consistently stressed quite often, what's led to this level of stress and how can we best manage it. Some of our clinicians are trained in a lot of different things. So we have a gambit of clinicians, maybe well, not EMDR anymore, but like cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT, like humanistic therapy approach, things like that, to where we have clinicians who can kind of meet you where you are in relation to many different phases of the therapeutic relationship. And when we identify that maybe we have, let's say, our number of sessions, and we notate that we need ongoing care and or long-term treatment, we then help you find a long-term provider who is like within that medical insurance match, so that way you can continue to meet with somebody longer time. But if you know, I always tell people from the get-go that are concerned, maybe it's like a complex history of trauma, abuse, or neglect. It might be most beneficial to reach out to our medical insurance, see a long-term clinician right away versus doing the EAP route due to the fact that sometimes it can be hard to stop and start with the clinician. Although we never just stop and start you because I say that we shouldn't do that. We kind of meet you with where you are and kind of walk you through until we got to that appointment. But even then, it's still hard to kind of talk about things with two people. So if we know that it's going to be something that does require long-term therapy, we can reach out to the EAP and do in the moment support as well as identify and have the EAP look into providers in our area that can help provide assistance and go that method too. But I always say, when in doubt, just give us a call anyway. We love to talk. In a sense that if there are any questions, we do our best to not only answer them in that moment, but if not, get right back to you. But if there's ever any emergency situations, always use 911. So again, it's kind of like going over more so some of those things. So we have mental health counseling, life coaching. So individuals have asked, what's the difference? I'm like, okay, so a mental health counselor, someone looks at signs and symptoms of mental health and then identifies with treatment and treatment plan. A life coach is an accountability partner, so someone who helps us kind of also set goals, but more so life goals that we're looking to accomplish and be held accountable for. So that's like a big difference between the two. But if you ever have questions about it, again, our intake team is awesome. And if not, I'm awesome. We'll figure it out together. But with that, they will be able to kind of walk you through with which line may make the most sense for you, as well as like how they can provide support. A big one for people is like work-life resources and referral. So with that, they provide information and referrals for individuals maybe seeking childcare, adoption, maybe special needs support, elder care, housing, transportation, education, and pet care. So a lot. So when you think of like work life, it's like how can an individual assist you with making things run more smoothly in your world? That's where work life resources and referrals would be. So sometimes it's great to kind of have that in your back pocket when life takes off and you have a lot going on. Another big one is a financial and legal consultation. So within both of these, as it identifies, it's like a consultation and referral. So basically, it's like I think if I'm not mistaken, it should still be like about 30 minutes of consultation with financial and our legal team. And then from there, you identify if you'd like to continue and set up a long-standing meeting with someone. Within that meeting, of course, like that'd be something that you have to pay for, but it gives you the opportunity to kind of try it before you buy it, as well as ask any questions that you may have. So I say for me, like whenever I'm looking to utilize any service that is like a free for so long, I identify with writing down most questions I may have to see if how many we get through, as well as like if that's going to offer level of support that I need. So I also encourage you to do the same thing. So these services are free to use, confidential, and available to you and or your family members in the home. I always say if they live with you, they have the ability to stress you out. So therefore, if they're a part of your stressors and need assistance navigating through life, they're also able to utilize the service. It does start at 8 though, so 8 and above we're able to support. So 8 into end of life. Below 8, because that typically requires like specialized certification, at least from our company in relation to like child therapy. We don't have that right now, so we do 8 and above. So you got an 8-year-old that's stressing you out, getting ready for, well, that, oh, I forget what grade that would be. Maybe like first, second grade. Then they can kind of talk through things because, again, if they are stressed, they're also add to your stress. So I want you to know that we are here for you at any point of your journey. And right now is a great time if you have any additional questions at all.
So go ahead if you want to drop questions in the chat. I'm happy to read them out loud. But just a big shout out to Gary. This was a great presentation. Super important stuff here. I will kick us off with a question. You know, sometimes in the workplace, maybe you experience people making kind of casual comments around suicide. How do you address those?
I would address them kind of head on, right? And kind of mirror what they've expressed. So, a common one that you may hear is like, "Oh man, this meeting is so horrible. I'm just gonna go drive in the car and drive off a bridge," right? I'll notate that and say, "Okay, so this meeting has been very stressful. I want to drive off a bridge." That's a lot. How are you doing, right? So you just kind of address it head on, because then it kind of helps eliminate the stigma, while also letting that person know that some of these things that we may utilize may not be the most appropriate in the workplace. And if we are to that point, I'm happy that they're comfortable to express it, but just mean them in that point and just identifying as to express it.
Perfect. And I'm seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat. Um, any suggestions as to how to promote Suicide Awareness Month to the public?
That's a fun one. I think for a lot, like if you like maybe handouts, right? Handouts on suicide awareness, as well as like I'm pretty sure on the 988, the National Suicide Prevention website, they probably have handouts that are able to be printable, kind of storing them out. Maybe allowing like Q&As from communities members in the sorry, clinicians in the community, right? So maybe I know that a lot of clinicians in the community, they do events like this because it helps like not only market them but also assist the community overall. So reaching out to one of those local providers could also be a great option too. But we having like handouts and things like that that can be of support, or like social media teams. I think most companies have now, it's where they kind of put something out there as well.
I think too, tagging onto that, you could also do some "Are you okay" crafts. You know,
Yeah.
if you want to utilize some crafting, to give people opportunities to maybe have a visual cue to remind people, like, it's a good time to check in.
Yeah, I like that. Look at that, DJ. I like that. Like, are you okay, crap? You know, something else that they've done at universities is did like free hug, right? Free hug day, where it's like I know questions asked. If you need a hug, you can get a hug. Some people are like, I'm not comfortable with that. So I get it. So like whatever is within your comfort zone could be of support during that time. But I do like those crafts though, dude. I'm gonna have to ask you about them crafts more. Like you must know some crafts. I need to know.
Emily, listen, what's a library without crafts? I'm just saying.
Ex that's what my 4-year-old says. Like, I love the library. There's crafts and there's this and like there's blocks I can build. I'm like, hey, they're fostering that growth and development. So you're right.
That's it. That's it. Um, any other questions? Feel free, don't be shy. Um, I'm not seeing anything, so thank you, Gary, for your time. I appreciate it so much. Oh, I see someone said also some mental health focused vinyl stickers would be good
Yeah,
as
people
well.
love stickers. My 3-year-old takes every sticker he sees. Well, 4, sorry, just turned 4. Okay, pass them on. Some of those are some. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome. I love
Yeah.
that.
And that
No, I
is one
love
of the
that.
things that not everyone knows, the semicolon, like, as a symbol of suicide resilience.
Mhm. So yeah, even like education around that, and the stickers are a great talking point for it. So I think that within the group that we have here, again, we don't have to necessarily be experts on the topic, but we at least be able to have some understanding of signs and symptoms to look out for, as well as like what that semicolon means. And
For
I'm a
sure.
lover of stickers too, so usually on my water bottles, my again, Tyler puts them all in my water bottle for work.
That's what they're there for.
Exactly. It's like, why do you have a Ninja Turtle? My kid put it on there, but it's okay. He loves Ninja Turtles. Or what is that hippopotamus? I'm like, I don't know, but he really enjoyed it, and he said, Dad, it's gonna make you think about me at work.
Yeah. It looks at TCL, Mental Health Awareness Month was hosted with a survival kit. They put the Inside Out movie. give them bags with handouts, and calming tea, and they got to decorate the bag.
I want to do that. That's awesome. I love that because again, like these things are all tangible as well as like assist us with like that thought prompting. And you can't go wrong with inside. That's a good one. I like that. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna put that down too. Some survival kits. So we got some DJ crafts and survival kits
That's
and
it.
stickers.
Well, thank you again, Gary, for your time. This has been a really great webinar. And same thing, if you want to follow up with Gary with more questions or anything like that, I'm happy to pass along your information.
Mhm.
And also, you can still get in touch with the EAP as well, whenever you need.
Absolutely. And I always say if there's ever any questions and or you just want to chat, just reach out. We're here for that. So I really do appreciate you guys not only taking the time to learn about this very sensitive topic, but being committed to it. So, hey, if we learn something, let's teach someone else. Or if not, at least remember when in doubt, call 911. But if we need support for ourselves afterwards, we can call the Employee Assistance Program, AllOne Health, to get that support after too. Because again, it impacts you as well.
Perfect. All right. Take care, everyone. We'll see you at the next webinar.